Did you know in Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time? There's a moment during the invasion of Alamu where Doston is about to jump off a wooden contraption. He stops for a moment, and the camera decides to focus on him while going around in a circular motion. This is actually an iconic feature from the Assassin's Creed franchise instead of the Prince of Persia franchise. This was done to pay homage to Assassin's Creed, since it's considered to be the spiritual successor to the original Prince of Persia series. This film was also meant to be the first in a franchise, but Ubisoft decided to shift their attention to the Assassin's Creed franchise instead. That film also ended up being a flop. Did you know in Salt, the compound mixture that she makes while the tactical team tries to gas her out of the interrogation room in the CIA office is an actual recipe? It's the mixture of ammonia and iodine, and it creates a sensitive contact explosive called ammonium triodide. It makes a brown paste that dries into a crystal form. A single breath of air could be enough pressure to set them off. Did you know in Ghost Rider, early on in the film, Blackheart heads into a saloon, and a biker stops him at the door. On his jacket, you can clearly see the number 666, but this isn't actually a biblical reference in this instance. The 6 is referred to the 6th letter of the alphabet, F. FFF stands for Filthy Few Forever, and this was originally used with the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club to show that a member was distinguished in the club. The biker even states that the saloon is only for angels, and this is another reference to the MC. This biker's also wearing a t-shirt that has an image of the X-Men villain Abyss on it. He wasn't the only fan of comics in the film. Nicolas Cage is actually a huge comic book fan, and his stage surname actually comes from the character Luke Cage. Did you know in Daredevil, there are quite a few goofs that were left in the film? When Bullseye talks to Kingpin about his costume, the background changes behind him, and you can clearly see that he's saying the original line, which uses more foul language. This was later put back into the film for the director's cut on DVD. During the same scene, Kingpin also has a cane in his hand as he heads over to his cabinet to pour a drink, but when he opens the cabinet, it disappears. When Bullseye throws a pencil through the olive, Kingpin's cane magically reappears in his hand. Before this, Matt Murdock receives his invitation to the Black and White Ball, and it's dated for July 24th. However, the date on the invitation he finds on his pillow is actually for August 13th. Did you know in Alice in Wonderland, Anne Hathaway was originally offered the role of Alice, but she decided to turn it down, since the role was too similar to many of her other previous roles. This was also before Tim Burton was attached to the project. After Tim Burton came on board, she was so keen to work with him that she happily took the role of the White Queen. All of her scenes managed to get shot in 2 weeks. Did you know in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Matthew Lewis actually suffered a perforated eardrum during the standoff scene at the Ministry of Magic? He tilted his head while Helena improvised sticking her wand in his ear. Lewis ended up being deaf in that ear for a few days, but he laughed about the incident in later interviews. At first, Helena had no idea that she had hurt Lewis, but when she found out, she immediately regretted it and apologized profusely. Did you know in Maleficent, Angelina Jolie insisted that the dialogue for Aurora's christening sequence should be written word for word off of the original animated movie? She believed that this scene was the main core and setup for the entire film, and the new story differs by having Maleficent give her a sleeping curse instead of a death curse. This scene also has cameos of Angelina's kids, Pax Jolie Pitt and Zahara Jolie Pitt. Did you know in Ready Player One, there are multiple hints at Sho's young age? During the team's time in the Shining simulation, Sho mentions that he actually had to watch the movie through his fingers, and this hints that he was actually way too young to watch something like that. Also, during the race, he was one of the few people to total his car even though there were no obstacles. This could hint at the fact that he was too young to even know how to drive. Did you know in The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio went all in with his role? For one thing, Leonardo is a vegetarian, and he still chose to eat a raw slab of real bison's liver. He also had to learn multiple things in order to get further involved with his character. He learned how to shoot a musket, build a fire, speak 2 separate Native American languages, and he even studied with a doctor that focuses on ancient healing techniques. Because of all of this and the different conditions involved, Leo says that this was his hardest performance of his entire career. Did you know in Dunkirk, you can actually see them building the set when you look up the location on Google Maps? On Dunkirk Beach, you can see them building the initial alleyway that Tommy runs out to get to the beach. There are film signs attached that can be seen, and after zooming in, you can see the background detail of this movie. Only the road signs had been removed. Originally, there was a 1920s-style light with a glass ball shade there. On top of that, they actually landed a Spitfire on Dunkirk Beach for one of the scenes. And it's the first time that a plane has landed on that beach since 1940. It ended up getting stuck, and they frantically tried to get it out before the incoming tide did any damage to the plane. Did you know in Hulk, the ILM animators were put to work for this film? They ended up having to create 3 different Hulks that were used for different developmental stages of the character. In his first scene, he's only 9 feet tall. By the second time, he's 12 feet tall. And his final 2 times shown, he ends up being 15 feet tall, which represents an adult Hulk who's in full control. There was also a lot more originally planned for the dogfighting scene. They only ended up using a third of the initially planned concept because filming it would have surpassed the film's budget on that scene alone. Oddly enough, the movie's first trailer was released with a CGI Hulk that wasn't finished yet, and the viewers dubbed it as Shrek on steroids. Did you know in Alien, the chest burster scene was actually filmed in 2 takes? Contrary to the myth. During the first take, the chest burster didn't make it through Jane's shirt, so they had to reset and shoot the scene again. Ridley ended up putting the failed attempt into the film since it looked like the creature was trying to struggle to push its way out. He believed that the scene was more violent this way. Did you know in Superman Returns, there are multiple homages to the original 1978 Superman film? The truck that Martha drives in the opening is the same truck that was used for the first film. The producers actually rented it for use in the film. Superman's silver suit that he wears after crashing to Smallville is a direct reference to the costumes used by Kryptonians in 1978. Marlon Brando posthumously reprises his role of Jor-El. There are multiple photos of Glenn Ford around the Kent farm, and the most obvious one is on the piano during the reunion scene. After Clark shows Lois Lane why he thinks Earth needs a savior, he returns her to the roof of the Daily Planet, and the original film's Can You Read My Mind can be heard, which was used for Superman's and Lois's first flight. Did you know in Source Code, the director took an interesting approach for keeping Jake disoriented during the train sequences? Jake had to wear an earbud for these shots, and the director would start playing music at any time. He played random songs, and he even decided to play Static Buzz at times to mix things up. To top it off, Jake never actually shared any scenes with Vera Farmiga and Jeffrey Wright, but he wanted to make sure they had something to bounce off of while they're acting. So Jake purposefully stayed on after finishing his scenes so he could provide voice work for them. Did you know in Cobra Kai, it's been long debated that Daniel is actually the true antagonist of the original Karate Kid movie, since he instigates all of the problems that result in him getting beaten up. In Cobra Kai, they seem to address this again. When Johnny decides to open up the Cobra Kai dojo, Daniel goes to great lengths to make sure that the dojo gets shut down. But we, as the audience, can see that Johnny just wants to improve his life. There's even a reference in the Season 3 premiere that Daniel is the real, true bully of the series and franchise. Did you know in Pinocchio, all of Geppetto's cuckoo clocks are based on Disney characters? There's Woody and Bullseye from the Toy Story series, Roger Rabbit and Jessica kissing, Donald Duck, the Lion King, Archimedes the Owl from The Sword and the Stone, Dumbo, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and Princess Aurora and Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. All of the clocks that aren't based on these are actually recreated from the original clocks used in the original animated Pinocchio film. This isn't the only connection to the original that they decided to keep a focus on either. In the opening of the film, Jiminy sings the official Disney fanfare, When You Wish Upon a Star. The song was originally from the animated original, and Jiminy sang it in this version as well. Did you know in Jeepers Creepers Reborn, there are multiple references to previous Jeepers Creepers films? For one, the dolls that are reminiscent of voodoo dolls represent victims of the other films. Victims such as Derry Jenner, Cat Lady, Robert Gideon, Natasha Weston, the officer whose heart is eaten, the criminal whose leg is eaten, and the dying man Derry finds in the House of Pain are all dolls in this scene. There's also a scene towards the beginning where the creeper's crawling out of the barn, and you can see the post-puncher weapon that was used to hurt the creeper in Jeepers Creepers 2. Also, this film keeps up the tradition of a character urinating just as the previous 3 films do. In this film, Sam is the culprit before he's killed off by the creeper. Did you know in Charlie's Angels, there are multiple references to the previous films and show? During the closing credits, it's revealed that Charlie was actually played by Jacqueline Smith using a voice modulator. Jacqueline played one of the original Angels in the show, and she's the only actress to stay throughout the series' entire run. Then, when Bosley was considered to have gone rogue, they mentioned that this isn't the first time that an angel betrayed the organization. This is a reference to the 2003 Charlie's Angels Full Throttle film, where Demi Moore's character Madison Lee does just that. They also digitally retconned Patrick Stewart into different shots from the show and previous films to show that he really was the original Bosley. Did you know in Jurassic World Dominion, the cast from the original Jurassic Park continue traditions and fix plot holes as they go on in this film? Alan Grant spent the beginning of the first film teaching a child about how raptors don't go for the jugular like a lion. In this film, he amends his original statement and now realizes that raptors really are smart enough to go for the throat. He's also smart enough to follow Owen's lead when they're trying to catch the baby raptor, and he listens to Owen speak about how they should triangulate their approach. Ellie Sattler can also be seen wearing a ring that's an oval piece of amber with something trapped inside. This alludes to Dr. Hammond's walking stick that had a mosquito encased in amber. September. Did you know in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, there's a similarity to the show Sliders? In Sliders, they traverse multiverses in the pilot episode, and the first universe that Quinn goes to is essentially the same as the normal universe. The main difference is the fact that you go on red lights and stop on green lights. In Doctor Strange, this is the first thing that Strange and America encounter when they go to another universe. This is also one of the few times that two captains of the Enterprise have appeared in the same scene. Patrick Stewart and Anson Mount have both played captains in Star Trek.